I don't know if you remember, but a few years back, maybe several years back, there was a program played on NBC. It's called The Fear Factor. You remember that show? It was kind of a reality competition program where contestants would face their fears by encountering those things that frightened or repulsed so many of us. You know, things like bugs, heights, gross stuff, and so on. And the object was to meet the challenge more quickly than the competition, who were, of course, also facing their fears. And it was undeniably difficult. It was designed to be that way for the competitors, because let's face it, those things that frighten us hold a great deal of power over us. I know how Cindy and I know that so very well. And we can even go so far as to say that to a large extent, we can even be enslaved by our fears. The fears that we have can become harsh taskmasters to drive us to do things that we otherwise wouldn't do, or our fears can keep us from doing those things that we know we should be doing. We become enslaved by our fears, and they cause us to do things that people should not do. We see a prime example of that in our gospel lesson today, right? And although Matthew's intent in relaying these events as he did may well have been to help people understand that Jesus is the fulfillment of so many Old Testament prophecies, but in doing that, he also shows us the very darkest side of our human condition in the actions of King Herod. Because after, the Magi informed Herod about the child that they'd come to see, this child that was born to be king of the Jews, Herod asked them to tell him where this new king is so that he can go and honor him. Of course, that's at least the story that Herod wanted the Magi to believe. However, the Magi, having been warned in a dream, did not return to Herod. So Herod had no idea where this child was. So Matthew tells us what happened next. When Herod knew the Magi had fooled him, he grew very angry. He sent soldiers to kill all the male children in Bethlehem and in all the surrounding territory who were 2 years old and younger, according to the time that he had learned from the Magi. So you see, Herod didn't want to honor this new child, the one he was told was born to be king of the Jews, because Herod was afraid. He was afraid of the child. He was afraid that this child would grow up, that he would take Herod's position, and with that take all of the stuff that Herod really wanted to keep, power and prestige and wealth. Herod's fear of losing what he wanted to keep for himself caused him to stoop to the awful depths of human sinfulness and order the execution of every male child that could possibly be of the age that he thought this baby described by the Magi would be. Can you imagine that? Being so afraid of losing what you have that you would be willing to hurt or even kill other people? How awful is that? How awful is that? To allow your fears to get you in a place where you would facilitate harm to others. Wow. And it's easy. It's frightfully easy for us to sit here in the comfort of the sanctuary and scowl in righteous indignation at the acts of Herod. And the truth is, we should be displeased with what Herod did. However, even as we condemn Herod's fear-driven actions, we should be aware of our own. Because we are enslaved by fear too. We are. For many, many years, this country, our country, land of the free, home of the brave, has enacted various immigration laws, which have all been aimed at controlling just who and how many can come into our country. Been going on for years, pretty much throughout our history. Laws have been enacted to control who can come in. And we need to really face the truth as to why these laws were passed. Because these laws were passed, these laws, many of them are still kept in place because we have been afraid that others may get that which we want to keep for ourselves. Whether that be wealth, or land, or jobs, or security, or racial purity, or who knows how many other reasons are out there. We are afraid. We are afraid that people are going to move into this country wholesale and take some of what we got. So more and more and more laws are passed, walls are being built. And all the while that this is happening, and has been happening, our neighbors, every single one of them, a child of God, as are we, many of whom are trying to flee from grinding, abject poverty and horrific violence, who are seeking to get a better life, they're stopped. They're detained. Sometimes they're separated from their families. It's happening. Has been happening. And of course, we soothe our guilty consciences by telling ourselves, well, those people are trying to get here illegally. Well, there's a reason why they're trying to get here illegally, because things are really that bad where they are, and they can't get in here to a place of safety legally, because the laws have been enacted to make that very difficult. So again, fear causes them to do things that maybe people wouldn't ordinarily do. They pack up, they leave where they are, they take horrendous risks just to get into this country. Even now. And as this immigration debate continues to swirl all around us, I sometimes catch myself wondering, particularly when I read the story that we just read from Matthew's Gospel. I catch myself wondering sometimes, what would have happened to Joseph and Mary and the baby Jesus if the Egyptians had stringent anti-immigration laws in place at the time Joseph fled for the safety of his family? Brothers and sisters, fear is a harsh taskmaster. It's a powerful motivator. And we see evidence of that in so many ways, right? Just talked about the immigration laws. Okay? In recent years, voter registration laws have been becoming increasingly popular. They're ostensibly aimed at eliminating voter fraud, quote unquote. But the actual cause of those laws, or the effect of those laws, is making it more and more difficult for minorities to vote and have their voices heard in the elections at the ballot box. We've seen evidence of that in our state just recently. You got to have certain ID in order to vote. Well, a lot of people, particularly people on the reservations, don't have those addresses that they require. It makes it harder for them to have their voice heard. Those who are in power in so many places, and not just in North Dakota, are afraid that some of their power may be taken by others, so they take steps to prevent that from happening, to protect the power they want to keep for themselves. And they try to hide it under this guise of voter fraud. Well, study after study after study has shown that voter fraud in recent years hasn't been nearly as prevalent as some of the fear-mongers would have us to believe. And in fact, actual proven incidents of voter fraud is generally so small as to be negligible. They don't believe it could have swayed any of the any of the elections. So the real issue here is fear of losing positions of power. So we do what we got to do to keep the power that we want. Have you heard of gerrymandering? That's also driven by fear. Gerrymandering is a process wherein voter districts are redrawn not so much on geographical lines as in political lines. So they zigzag all over the place. Look up maps of some of the districts, especially out east. And they're redrawn by the party in power so that they can consolidate the maximum number of voters that are going to vote for their party so that they can win. Okay? So that they can keep their power. I could go on and on. But the truth is that fear is an incredibly powerful motivator. Fear is what Satan uses to tempt us to stray from the standards of loving behavior to which the people of God, you and I, are called. We need to realize what's going on, because there are already more than enough modern-day Herods in this world in which we live. You and I, need to make a renewed effort to be the caring people that God has redeemed and called us to be. We are the children of a loving God who, through the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, has already taken care of our greatest existential fear, which is death itself. In the letter to the Hebrews that we visited just a couple of minutes ago, we read of what Jesus has already done for us. It's a done deal. He did this to destroy the one who holds the power over death, the devil, by dying. He set free those who were held in slavery their entire lives by their fear of death. We need to realize that Satan, even death itself, has no hold over us. God has already won that battle for us. So let us seek to be what we can be. To be the kind of people God has called us to be. You know, I'm not disputing the fact that there is an immigration crisis in the Americas. And this crisis is fueled by the misery and fear of our neighbors who, fearing for their very lives, take incredible risks to find safety. So they keep coming. We keep passing laws, they keep coming anyway. We build walls, they keep coming anyway. Folks, what we're doing ain't working. There's this wonderful quote from Bishop Desmond Tutu. And he says, there comes a point where we need to stop just pulling people out of the river. We need to go upstream and find out why they're falling in. Instead of building more walls to keep people out, instead of building more jails or cages to separate families who are desperately fleeing their countries to come to us, instead let us see what we can do to help them live better lives where they are. And I know that's a complex and a difficult question. But in reality, that's the only way to stop them from risking their lives on the chance of finding a better life here. Because we can pass laws, we can build walls till the cows come home, but as long as people live in fear of violence and starvation in their homeland, they are going to keep trying to find a safer place. Instead of seeking ways to keep those who are not just like us from making their voices heard in the ballot box, let us strive to find ways to hear everybody's voices, to understand what their needs, what their fears are, so that together we can make this country a better place for everyone who lives here. Because we're all children of the same loving God. Our God has already made sure that even the very worst that this world can throw at us cannot overcome His love that will raise us up and give us an eternal life. Know that truth. Own that truth. Let it shape your actions. Do not let fear enslave you any longer. Listen to the Lord your God, who commands you to love your neighbor just as you love yourself. And then go out and do just that. Amen.